You reach for something at the same time as someone else. Oh, sorry. You send a simple email. Sorry to bother you. You share an idea. Sorry, just a thought. Women apologize constantly, often without realizing it. But is it really about politeness, or is it something deeper? Today, we're breaking down why women say sorry too much, how it holds them back, and how to finally stop apologizing for simply existing. From a young age, girls are often praised for being well-behaved or easygoing and encouraged to be polite and accommodating. It's almost like a silent rule. Speak too directly, and you might be seen as harsh. Stand firm, and you risk being labeled stubborn. Voice a strong opinion, and suddenly you're making others uncomfortable. So, naturally, girls start adjusting. Voices soften, statements are carefully reworded, and before long, sorry becomes a reflex. These little moments happen so subtly that they almost feel second nature. Like when a young girl hesitates to speak up in class, worried she might sound too confident, or when a woman in a meeting says, "Sorry, just to add something," as if her point needs permission. It's not always a conscious choice. It's something learned over time, like an automatic response to a culture that expects women to be accommodating. And here's where it gets interesting. This habit doesn't always come from a lack of confidence. Even women who are highly accomplished can find themselves apologizing just to smooth things over or seem more approachable. It's a way to keep the peace and avoid seeming too assertive. But over time, this constant apologizing can dilute their presence, making even strong points sound hesitant or uncertain. The psychology behind it is fascinating too. Women tend to have a lower threshold for feeling like they've done something wrong, so apologizing becomes their go-to response, even in situations where they've done nothing wrong. Add that to the fear of being misunderstood or judged. Assertiveness can be seen as aggression, and having clear boundaries might be labeled as difficult, and it's no wonder women often soften their approach. It's like saying, "I just don't think I can make that work," instead of being firm and saying, "That won't work for me." Then there's the people-pleasing side of things. Women might say sorry when they don't need to, like when they decline an invitation or ask a question, just to avoid making others uncomfortable. But when sorry becomes the default, it can send the message that taking up space or having boundaries needs an explanation. What if we didn't need to soften our strength or apologize for simply existing? What if we could communicate confidently, without all the unnecessary apologies? That's the shift we're talking about, learning to stand comfortably in your own presence and communicate without shrinking. But what happens when sorry becomes your automatic response? Let's dive into that next. Apologies serve a purpose when they're necessary, but when they become a habit, they begin to work against you. A subtle sorry before speaking, a quick apology for asking a valid question, a reflexive "I hope that's okay" when setting a boundary. These small concessions seem harmless, but over time, they chip away at authority, confidence, and self-perception. One of the first consequences of over-apologizing is how it affects credibility. Language shapes perception. Saying, "Sorry, can I ask a question?" immediately diminishes the weight of what follows. It implies hesitation, as though permission is needed to participate. Compare that to, "I have a question." The difference is subtle, but powerful. The latter conveys confidence, commands attention, and signals that the speaker's input matters. The same applies in professional and personal settings. When ideas, boundaries, or perspectives are consistently softened by unnecessary apologies, they lose impact. A woman who frequently prefaces statements with "I'm sorry" unintentionally signals uncertainty, even when she is fully capable and knowledgeable. Beyond the external perception, habitual apologizing also takes an internal toll. The constant urge to smooth interactions, to ensure that no one is uncomfortable, creates mental and emotional fatigue. Over time, the weight of always trying to avoid conflict or disapproval becomes exhausting. Decisions feel heavier than they should, not because they are complex, but because they come with an added layer of worry. How will this be received? Will this upset someone? Is it too much? The energy spent second-guessing could be used for progress, but instead, it fuels self-doubt. This erosion of confidence is one of the most damaging effects of over-apologizing. A woman who constantly feels the need to justify her choices, soften her words, or downplay her achievements gradually begins to internalize the idea that her presence, her voice, or her success must come with an explanation. The message becomes clear. Taking up space requires permission. It is not just about how others perceive it, it is about how it reinforces a smaller sense of self. The habit of shrinking oneself through apologies becomes deeply ingrained. A woman hesitates before disagreeing in a conversation, concerned about seeming difficult. She downplays her expertise in a meeting, worried about being perceived as overconfident. She quickly adds, "I hope that makes sense," at the end of a perfectly clear point, as if seeking reassurance. The repetition of these small moments builds into something significant, a pattern where self-assurance is traded for acceptability. But here's the reality. Confidence does not require permission. Presence does not need justification. Authority is not granted by others. It is embodied. The shift begins not with dramatic changes, but with awareness. Recognizing when an apology is automatic rather than necessary is the first step. The next, learning how to replace it with language that asserts rather than diminishes. That's exactly what we're exploring next. Breaking the cycle of over-apologizing starts with awareness. Constantly saying, "I'm sorry," for minor things erodes confidence and makes you feel like a burden when you're not. It also weakens the impact of real apologies, making them less meaningful when they actually matter. Worse, excessive apologies can project insecurity, affecting how others see you. The key? Pause before apologizing. Ask yourself, is this necessary? The real shift begins when a woman stops believing she needs to justify herself. Boundaries do not require an explanation, yet societal pressure suggests otherwise. Saying no often feels like an act that must be softened. "Sorry, I can't make it." But why the apology? Choosing where to invest time and energy is not something that needs to be excused. "I won't be able to attend." Simple. Director. No unnecessary guilt. This is not about disregarding kindness. It is about understanding that confidence and consideration can coexist. Society teaches women to tread carefully, to preface statements with disclaimers, to ensure that their presence is non-threatening. That expectation is deeply ingrained, but it is not unshakable. Assertiveness is often misinterpreted, not because it is inherently aggressive, but because it challenges expectations. A woman who states her opinion directly may be seen as too bold, too firm, too much. But the truth is, clarity is not harsh. A strong voice is not a threat. Replacing "sorry, but I disagree" with "I see it differently" is not a demand. It is a statement. Confidence is not about overpowering others. It is about standing in one's truth without unnecessary hesitation. The mental shift happens when a woman realizes she does not need permission to take up space. She does not need to dilute her opinions, over-explain her choices, or frame her thoughts in ways that make them more pleasant. When she removes the reflexive apologies, she is left with something stronger: presence. And this presence is not about volume or force. It is about certainty. A sophisticated woman does not rush to excuse herself for existing. She does not ask for approval before stating a thought. She does not weaken her words to appear more accommodating. She understands that her voice is valuable as it is. The pressure to soften does not disappear overnight. It is reinforced in subtle ways: raised eyebrows, dismissive tones, quiet disapproval. But the shift begins internally. Strength does not come from external validation. It comes from an unshakable belief that her words, her boundaries, and her choices are enough. Once that belief is in place, everything else follows. The apologies fade. The hesitation disappears. The presence grows. The world has spent far too long teaching women to shrink, to soften opinions, to make space for others before claiming their own. But confidence is not something that needs an apology. It is not something that requires permission. It is something to own. So here's a challenge. Go one day without saying sorry unless it is truly necessary. No apologies for asking a question, for having an opinion, for taking a moment to think. Just observe. Notice how it shifts your confidence. Notice how people respond to you when your words carry certainty instead of hesitation. If this resonates with you, share your experience in the comments. What did you notice? Hit the like button and subscribe for more conversations on confidence, presence, and living unapologetically.